Hi, everyone. I'm Ron, and I'm here with my favorite blonde, one of my favorite blondes and custody queen, Kristen. This episode is a little different from what you've seen from us recently. One of the reasons is because it deals with something that happened at my alma mater. I went to BYU for both undergrad and law school. I'm a huge BYU fan. And recently, a BYU football player was arrested for rape. As family law lawyers, this is something that we deal with all the time. And so we wanted to share some of our thoughts about this with you.
So, Ron, we're talking about the first degree felony SA charge against BYU wide receiver Parker Kingston, right?
Yep.
Okay, so we're always super interested in probable cause affidavits. We know how misleading they can potentially be, or how a lot of it is based on assumption or inference to kind of get the case going. I definitely want to dig into it in the future, but and it has been unsealed, is my understanding, right?
It has. I haven't seen it. I've seen reports of it, and I've seen multiple summaries of what was in it. And so we will talk a little bit about that and what was in it.
Oh, good.
Let me just give a little background here, because this is why this is really hard hitting right now. Because just last year, in fact, probably around March or April, the BYU athletic community was rocked by a civil lawsuit that was filed against then quarterback Jake Retzlaff, who, by the way, is local to our office. He's from Centennial High School, nearby where we're located. So I had some particular affinity for him, and it hit me hard when that happened. Turns out that lawsuit was dropped. The allegations were false. However, because of BYU's status as a religious school, it has a very strict honor code. And one tenet of that is that students, faculty, anybody employed by the school is not allowed to participate in extramarital sexual activity. And part of what Jake Retzlaff before had admitted to was consensual sex. Turns out that's what happened. That one was not rape, but he ended up transferring away from BYU, which caused a little uproar. Now come to this year, the season ended a few months ago. And here's the ironic thing about this is I was at a BYU basketball game a couple weeks ago, and on the big screen, they showed a picture of BYU's star wide receiver, Parker Kingston, with his fiancée holding up her engagement ring. It was essentially the public announcement of their engagement. Within 3 or 4 days, it hit the press that he had been not accused, not a civil complaint. He had been arrested in St. George, Utah for first-degree rape.
I read about that while I was sitting at soccer practice the other day. Once obviously this case is getting a lot of interest. And he wasn't just an offensive player for anyone watching. He was like the leading receiver in 2025. He was the man in BYU with respect to the BYU Cougars football team. But when I was looking at that, Ron, when I was seeing that connection of how close to the announcement and the arrest, he very likely had to know that was coming down the pipeline. At least that there was speculation that something was going on.
Yeah, I think it's something that a lot of people who are involved in something like that, number one, he probably downplayed. Now, again, let me back up, because these are allegations, and he has claimed that the sex was consensual. Again, that's a problem for BYU. It wouldn't necessarily be a problem anywhere else, but certainly these sorts of issues arise everywhere else. He probably riding high on his status as the star football player going into his senior season. I think he probably was hopeful that it wouldn't turn into anything, that it wouldn't come out, that it would go away, and he could move on. But he couldn't, and it didn't.
Yeah, and when you hold a public persona, or you have kind of a public figure type influencer, professional athlete, dealing with, we're family law attorneys, we actually see these a lot of times, that these rumors are simply rumors or fabricated claims. Now, for me personally, it seems like there's a lot of smoke to this case, and where there's smoke, there's generally some fire. However, we will let the evidence speak and the evidence do the talking. But yes, Ron is 100% right. If you don't know us, we are the custody queens off the clock. We are certified family law attorneys by day and legal enthusiasts at night, going over the evidence and the discovery, and what did the court miss, what did the judge miss, and what are the errors that we can really dive into with respect to these cases. This podcast is limited to educational and entertainment purposes only. Everything that we say on this episode and every episode we do is our personal opinions, and we are by no means giving any legal advice.
You know, I get the chance every once in a while as a judge pro tem to sit as a judge and have people give their cases to me, and I have to make a decision. In fact, yesterday, and this comes to mind because it was just yesterday, I had a case in front of me. It was two propers, two people who didn't have lawyers, and one of the allegations in that domestic violence case was rape. They weren't married, so it was the girlfriend alleged that the guy would wake her up and initiate sex. By doing that, she would say no, and he would continue doing it. And it was really interesting in that one because she testified about that. And when it came his time, I repeatedly asked him, would you like to address any of the other allegations? Because there were some other things that he did address. He never did. And I wonder sometimes, why would you not deny that? I think sometimes it's because of the perception. I sincerely believe he didn't think he was doing anything wrong when that happened. And so I think this issue of consent is something, it comes up. It's an issue in marriage too. You know, you don't get a flat consent all the time just because you're married. It's still every time there needs to be full consent by both parties. And I think there's a lot of people that just don't quite understand that. And I think that's probably what we see. I'm sure that's what we see with these athletes when these come up, is they're a little fuzzy on the issue of consent and what really is consent.
Yeah, I was actually just looking up the legal definition of consent. I know this was actually something we spent an extensive amount of time in with respect to law school in criminal cases, because obviously that can be an affirmative defense sometimes in a criminal case, and even often a civil case at times. But in criminal cases, the general legal definition of consent is that a voluntary, knowing, and intelligent agreement to engage in a specific act. Now, as attorneys, how ambiguous is that, right? And then you have to get to the next step. Even if you get to voluntary, knowing, and intelligent agreement, and then are we talking about the same exact act? Are we talking about an elevated act from what we agreed upon? I mean, you have to use your imagination a little bit, but when it comes to sexual, encounters, there can be a lot of, hey, I intended to do this, but not this, this, and this. And then I also think that were there any substances involved? Was there any alcohol that may have impaired my ability to consent to anything, let alone an elevated act? But Ron, what do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. And don't forget, consent can be withdrawn at any time. And that's hard for some people to deal with. But that's something that I think we need to keep learning that lesson as these things happen. Hopefully, somebody will look at this incident and learn from it and maybe avoid another incident in the future. But this issue of consent really is at the center of the probable cause affidavit. So let me just go through. I have some bullet points that were drawn from the reporting.
Wait, but
Um,
really quick before you do that, I just
yeah.
want to make sure that to add on to this consent, because I know we're going to get comments about it.
Mhm.
If there are situations where a person cannot legally consent, even if they are, okay, those include someone that's under the statutory age, someone
Mhm.
that's unconscious or asleep, or so intoxicated they cannot understand the nature of the act, mentally incapacitated, or developmentally disabled, depending on the statute. And again, these probably vary state to state just a little bit.
Mhm.
And the specific act to consent. Consent to one act is, like we were talking about, is not consent to another. And just like Ron said, that consent can be withdrawn at any time. And it's important to keep all of this information in place when we're going through the PCA. I always think it's interesting when I don't see a toxicology report in cases like this, because that is a huge component of consent.
Oh, absolutely. So here's what was in the probable cause statement. The alleged victim, we don't know her name, reported a sexual assault on February 27th, 2025. So this was, in fact, almost a year ago from right now when we're recording, at St. George Regional Hospital. The alleged incident occurred February 23rd, 2025. So it was 4 days later that this was reported. According to the affidavit, she told an interviewer that she set clear boundaries with Parker, including stating she did not want sex before the meeting. Now, here's the interesting thing. I know the area very well. St. George, from St. George to Provo, Utah, where BYU is located, where presumably Parker was, is several hours. So I don't know if he drove down from Provo to meet her or if he was somewhere more local to St. George. But apparently, before he went down to meet her, and I believe this is on text messages, she set clear boundaries and told him, "I don't want sex." In maybe not in those words. The affidavit says that night some consensual sexual activity occurred, not including intercourse, followed by an allegation of intercourse after she told him to stop and tried to push him off. Kingston told the investigators all activity was consensual, and the investigators cite digital communications taken from his phone as part of establishing probable cause. And so that's where apparently the discussions regarding what she wanted to do and what she didn't want to do happen.
And my guess is they went through those social media profiles extensively as well. I know a lot of people go through Snapchat or other, um, you know, direct messaging type platforms, WhatsApp, there's a whole bunch of different ones, thinking that it will never come to light. And just like I tell my clients all the time, you're creating a digital footprint, whether we think we've deleted it, whether we've done a double delete from our email. A lot of this stuff does in fact come out to haunt you and will bust you. I think the whole digital footprint is the face of really the investigation with these cases these days.
Yeah, I always tell my clients, whenever you're typing a text or an email to your ex, assume that the judge is reading it over your shoulder. I honestly, I think that's probably a good idea for everybody because you don't know when this is going to come out, when it's going to be used against you, or in favor, or to support you. Um, I think it's just good idea maybe to have a lot of your communications be in person or on the telephone if you don't want records.
You just gave me a red flag warning, because anyone that knows me, I dictate my text messages, and so they can be quite lengthy at times. I don't realize I talk very fast, as you probably know if you've watched our shows. Sometimes my brain can't keep up with how fast I talk. But that was just a pretty good reminder for me too. Not that I'm putting a lot of stuff in text messages that I want to hide, but I mean, look what we were able to do, Ron, just right before we started this, is we were going through the infamous files that are circulating right now, the 3 million plus.
Mhm.
And, we kept seeing words like beef jerky and pizza and cheesecake used. And we were able to just go do a search count for the word, which led us down another rabbit hole. That's for a different day. But I tell my clients the same thing. Every time you write an email, a text message, a post on social media, because it sounds like a really freaking good idea right now, because you feel good and you want to go tell the world about what's going on in your case, it's going to be used against you. I guarantee it. I guarantee it'll come out and be used against you at some point.
Oh yeah, I mean, the number of times I see threats in text messages, I think, are you stupid? You don't. I mean, number one, don't make threats, especially threats of violence. But if you're gonna do it, don't put it in a text.
Don't put it on a text. Don't do it on the ring cam. Don't leave it in a voicemail. I can't tell you how many times I've had opposing parties leave messages on my voicemail, like,
Yeah.
saying, or one of our attorneys saying that, if we don't stop, X, Y, and Z is going to happen. And I'm like, you are such an idiot for leaving this in a voicemail on a law firm's computer. Like, but,
I
I've
think
learned
one of
that a lot of people don't think when they act.
yeah, I think one of the first DV trials I did on one of your cases for you
Mhm.
involved threats that were left on a voicemail.
Yep, that was the one I was just referring to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I've unfortunately had a couple opposing parties that were not a fan of me, because I exposed their weaknesses. I'll leave it at that.
yeah.
And then they think that no one's going to find out, who left it, or we can't trace it. Obviously, there's a lot of investigation tools that are available to anyone these days. So, like Ron said, don't leave threats ever.
Yeah.
But just and nowadays, even with personal conversations and Google Glasses or Meta Glasses, I mean, I have just come to the conclusion that anywhere I am, whether it's my own car,
Mhm.
the bank, the grocery store, that I am being recorded. I've literally just come to that conclusion on some level.
Yeah. An important thing to remember, because especially in California, I know there are other states that are single party recording, that, just if one party to a conversation consents to a recording, audio or video or whatever, then that's sufficient. In California, it's two. Both parties have to. So, like, if you and I, Kristen, were standing in a room talking in a private room, I couldn't be recording you legally without your knowledge and your consent. But it's getting increasingly difficult to do now with the ring cameras and Google glasses. I had an incident in court regarding those recently, so I'm wondering if the laws regarding that sort of thing are going to end up changing in California to kind of match the technological times. And the other question is, should they? I mean, that's a big, you've got your First Amendment, your privacy rights versus safety and protection. And that raises, and it brings to mind a case I had. It was a domestic violence case, and the husband came to me, and after his wife filed a domestic violence restraining order against him, primarily alleging that he raped her. And so I talked with him, and as we were going over everything, well, what, tell me what happened. Do you have any documentation or anything? He goes, well, yeah, we recorded it. Like, okay. They certainly did. And it was, in fact, we brought the video into court, and I still remember the judge's reaction when I brought it up. I said, Judge, this was consensual, and we can prove it because it was recorded. Would you like to see the recording? Oh, he laughed.
I just laughed right now because as family law attorneys, there's really nothing that we have not seen or heard or been blindsided by. I actually had a case similar where I was like, Your Honor, would you like to see opposing party getting the cat drunk? I'll be darned, counsel. I would like to see that video. Or the boxes we've had to bring to trial that may include some toys that were probably meant to be in the bedroom in domestic violence cases to support our case. But I would have liked to see that judge's reaction for sure.
Yeah.
But Ron, back to the consent. This is where it gets really fuzzy, though. In a lot of cases, one, you have to have that reasonable expectation of privacy. And, your front porch generally is not. In your living room, yes. But also, the second that there's a third person in the group, the expectation of privacy is potentially no longer there.
You're not advocating what I think you are, Kristen, are you?
What is that?
A third person in the group?
I'm not going there specifically, but we've had many cases involving that. Not gonna lie.
No, but you almost wonder, are we getting to the point where maybe recordings would be helpful one way or the other? And,
I think they're happening a lot more than we think. So I feel like if there was actual laws that supported it or actually gave us guidelines, a little bit more clear. I think the law is going to have to adapt at some point, but I do agree. Where does our privacy go? At what point do we have any privacy left?
And here's another interesting issue in California is there is an exception to the wiretapping or the which includes video recording. Specifically with video recording, it's the audio portion that is subject to this. But there's an exception if you have a reasonable belief that you are recording potential domestic violence, where that is an exception to the wiretapping law that prohibits recording. So there's some interesting aspects of that.
There's so much subjection there. It's crazy to me.
Yeah. Perhaps some victim protection, but we don't know. This is just a really evolving area with the technology that we have, and it's going to be interesting to see where it goes.
But then on the flip side of that, so we have, and again, we'll get back to Parker, I promise, but this all involves SA, this all involves domestic violence, if we're looking under the umbrella of abuse. But on the flip side of that, I've had a couple cases over the years where the other party, was hired a private investigator to, try to go find out information on the other side. And generally it's for adultery or stepping outside the marriage, which doesn't really have any effect on the case per se. I don't say has zero effect because sometimes it can come into play with respect to support orders. But and because of that, they were infringing on their privacy. They were hiring the investigator to go trail them or track them. And that has resulted in the person hiring the investigator to get a restraining order against them.
I've seen that. I think we may be thinking of the same case, Kristen.
So I just feel like there is so much discretion with domestic violence within the court system and the judge, and in anticipation of domestic violence, or if you believe that domestic violence is likely to occur, it's just such a gray area for me. And I'm more of the black and the white.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about this 4-day delay between the alleged incident and when she reported it. Do you think, is that a problem to you, Kristen?
Not necessarily. I don't think it's nearly as extreme as the 8.5 hour delay in the Idaho case. I think that there are potentially a lot of feelings and emotions that a victim, potential victim here, could go through with what just happened, being considering they may feel embarrassed, ashamed.
Mhm.
They don't want to tell anyone. They're not sure what just happened. They blame, often victims blame themselves for getting themselves in this situation. I think there's just a lot of feelings and emotions that go on, and so it's anyone that's done any training or education with domestic violence knows that it often occurs more than once or over a period of time before someone actually comes forward to talk about it.
Yeah, and particularly in certain communities, and this where this occurred would probably be one. There is potentially a certain amount of potential shame involved, that it had gotten to that point in what had been done, and you don't want to reveal that. And there is a segment of society that likes to blame the victim a lot. A lot of times it's the ones who perpetrate. But there is a tendency for victims of abuse to not want to share or feel embarrassed or shamed. And I think that's really, really unfortunate.
I agree. It's and Ron, myself, Sam, we've kind of dedicated most a good portion of our careers to advocating for domestic violence victims. And I want to make it very clear that this happens to men, this happens to
Mhm.
kids. This is not limited to women only. I have had uh, a plethora of cases where the male has been the victim, and you see the same exact feelings, emotions going on with men as well, sometimes even worse, because they feel like they were the man, and how could this happen to them? And so I just want to make sure it's clear that everybody realizes that we are not saying that the woman is always the victim. But I agree, in a very religious geographic area, I think that that potentially could intensify the situation.
Mhm.
And I'm not overly concerned with that in this point. I think that's very common for SA
Mhm.
victims to not immediately run to the police or the law enforcement and say, hey, this happened to me. I think it's actually probably the reverse.
Yeah, and I don't want anyone to think that we're saying that this particular, because Utah is very Mormon, very Latter Day Saint. I don't want anybody to think that we're particularly saying that the LDS people in particular are prone to that. I don't think I just don't think that's true. But I think there is often a general sense of shame and embarrassment for anybody who's been subject to SA, just because they tend to blame themselves too, and in many cases where I think they should not. Um,
But I'll tell you what I do have an issue with, Ron. You said that this
yeah,
was a couple hours. He met her a couple hours from where the university was, right?
yeah, probably 3 to 4. It's probably 3 to 4 hours at least. Yeah.
So, minimal speculation going on here. Obviously, we
Mhm.
don't know any for sure facts. I think that should all
Yeah.
come out in the digital evidence. Hopefully, we get to actually see these
Mhm.
digital footprints. But that automatically sends a red flag up to me, because he's clearly, if true,
Mhm.
um, trying to go far enough that this isn't happening around BYU, because like you said, they have that very strict code of conduct
Yeah.
that if it got back, he would and this guy has a lot to lose. He's not just losing a scholarship, he's losing the notoriety, he's losing the potential to, go on and play beyond college, and all of the endorsements that he was likely getting. But he's trying to, if this is true, to me, going 4 hours away is, you are trying to keep this so far from your immediate circle in real life,
Mhm.
that I find that interesting.
Oh, and I guarantee he's getting NIL money. And he very well could have thrown away $1 million by doing this. He has been dismissed from the university and from the football team.
Yeah, I think potentially he's going to lose if this does come out and he is found to be guilty either by way of a plea deal or a jury of his peers. And we know that that can be dicey because jurors can be unpredictable. But if he is found guilty of this crime, I think he's going to lose millions and millions from potential future earnings that he had 6 months ago.
Yeah, he very likely was going to end up in the NFL. I think the prevailing thought was he was probably a 5th or 6th round pick, potentially increasing if he had a big senior year, which I think he very well may have. What do you think about with the victim going to the hospital 4 days after? Does that limit the kind of evidence that maybe could have been obtained in the same kit?
Yeah, I was going to leave this for you to answer there, Ron. I don't know a whole bunch with, clearly I'm not a medical staff expert, but my gut would tell me yes. If she had showered, changed clothes, put on any items on your body, lotion, serums. I think there's a lot that could potentially change what happened. But by the same token, I think experts would still be able to identify if intercourse was had.
Yeah, and potentially if there were any injuries as a result of it, and if they were consistent with what she said had happened. And I think also the nurse that specifically trained for this also would be able to get some information out of her and help get her story out and get the details of what happened. So I think it's more than just the physical examination. And here he admitted there was consensual activity. So I don't think there's really a question that there would have been DNA from him. That takes that out of the question. So there's other information that I think that could come from that, in particular injuries, and in particular whatever she told the nurse.
And my guess is too that she would either have offered up or that law enforcement would have requested any clothing, or undergarments that were worn that day. Hopefully they hadn't been washed. Also, it would have been asked in the investigation if she spoke to anyone else immediately following this. They would want to speak to those third parties, and not just for what was said, but what was her mental state, what was her behavior, was there anything that would make you believe this actually did happen with respect to evidence. And those are mental health professionals that would have been at the hospital. Like Ron said, they are trained to deal with these type of cases and SA cases. And they would have at least tried to elicit questions that would give them more information and more evidence of whether or not she is credible or this did or didn't happen. I found it to be actually quite interesting that he came out right away and said that there was some intercourse. What did you feel about that, Ron?
Yeah, it is. And that, especially because of the impact that has had, that alone, regardless of whether there was any sort of non-consensual activity, that alone was likely to and did result in him being dismissed from the university and from the football team. And in fact, over the years, that's been the bane of my BYU fandom, is that every few years something happens and you lose a player for the year, often to consensual sexual activity. And there's been some star players in the past that have been that's happened to. This is just kind of rough from the BYU fan perspective because it affected last year and now this coming year. With Parker Kingston was the very clear number one wide receiver for the team, and it was going to be a huge part of the offense, and now he's gone. And even if it came out and this was dismissed, even if it was dismissed in time for him to come back, there would likely be a suspension. Prevailing thought was that Jake Retzlaff last year received a 7-game suspension rather than have that affect basically his entire season. He transferred to Tulane and had a good season with them. In fact, made the college football playoffs. I don't know that under these circumstances that Parker is going to have the same good luck. This looks like something that is going to be going on for quite a while. And we've seen it already go on for quite a while because we're now right about a year from when this all happened. And so it's taken a year from the incident to almost a year till the arrest. And that's not that unusual. I think I've seen a lot of comments from people talking about the delay and how that may cast doubt on it, but that's really not the case, is it, Kristen?
No, not at all. I see that all the time. You know, our court system and judicial system, even on the family law side, is definitely not without flaw and can be painfully slow. You know, Ron, myself, Sam, we deal with clients where you get 1 day of trial 6 months out, and then you get another day 6 months later. And then you always ask, how does the judges take notes, but how do they remember the credibility of the witness or, you know, everything they were feeling at the time? So this process takes forever, and criminal is even worse, to be honest. And my guess is there was investigation going on again before he was arrested because they were gathering all of the information and the data. That was why usually there's some rumor, usually someone of that status would have enough people in their village or attorneys that they were working with and be like, hey, this is coming down the pipeline, right? Like in Diddy's case, we all know that he knew that this was coming, that these charges were coming, this arrest was coming. And I believe that was probably somewhat the case here. I think that Parker no longer being a BYU student is probably the absolute least of his concerns. I think the fact that he agreed to the fact that there was consensual sex, or that he's coming out and saying, hey, this did happen on some level, it was consent. He is giving this victim a lot of credibility. And that's a huge issue with a lot of the victims, is whether or not people believe them, that it not only happened, but it happened the way that they are describing it. He's saying, I did meet with her. I did engage in sexual acts and intercourse. However, my perception is, or my position is, that it was consensual on every level. So now the biggest issue in this case I see is whether or not there was actual consent. And if there was consent, was it withdrawn? And he ignored it and continued on. I mean, that's going to be the biggest issue in this case, on whether or not he likely heads to prison if he is found guilty.
Yeah, and this may actually be the reverse or he may try to argue the reverse of consent being withdrawn. Because there are text messages allegedly where she is saying, I don't want to go that far, or I don't want to do this, or here are the limits. I don't know exactly what they are. The texts themselves have not been released, but that's the sense of what I get they are. And so he may be arguing, yes, I know she said that, but then when I got there, she gave her consent. She changed her mind.
Which could have happened.
It does happen, but that's going to be a really interesting focus of the trial and discovery. And the other thing that it just floors me sometimes is how little people seem to remember of what they've said in text messages before. Because you see people say, I've never said that, as to a threat. Then, well, here it is right in your phone. You said it.
Text
Um,
messages, in my opinion, are the best evidence in domestic violence cases. The absolute best.
Almost every domestic violence case that I see now these days involves text messages of some sort, whether they're threats themselves or evidence of what happened, or somebody's trying to show that uh, the mindset of the person didn't feel afraid or threatened in any way, but in fact they were being playful. It's a huge, and we do communicate. I know. I look at my text. I have hundreds of text messages with my wife over the last few days. I'm sure, and I'm sure if we go back and we can see a good story of what's going on in our lives during the last however amount of time you look. And I'm sure there are things on there that I have forgotten that I told her. I do know that there's not going to be anything threatening on there, though.
I believe that, Ron. Ron's a big teddy bear.
Yeah, kind of a softie.
I had a case. I was a couple years ago, and I had to go through 8 years because this was a very complex case, and it was involving not only domestic violence but potential mental health issues, and was that person a threat to the children, physically, sexually, otherwise. And so this was a super, super intense case. But I had to go through 8 years of emails and text messages between these two people. And I can tell you there was a lot of stuff I wish I had never read. And if I was one of those parties, I would probably be absolutely humiliated that these now had to go through, a public court system. Because a lot of times it's, you don't think that many people are going to see these. And again, that goes back to my every time you read a text message in any case, family, civil, or like Ron said, in everyday life, how does this help me and how does this hurt me? That's how I do everything in life. And no, I don't always follow my own advice, but I'm working on that. I am a work in progress. But and this case is going to be interesting because it's not just that day, right? They're going to literally look up to the communications leading up to this. There is going to be a ton of discovery with respect to the defense is likely going to try to show her in a light that this was something that maybe she had done often, and this was not the first person. And that's very unfortunate, but that's always one of the biggest strategies that victims are faced with. And this is very, very difficult for anyone, man, woman, anybody, to put it out there that this happened to me, that I'm telling the world this happened. She's not getting financially compensated for doing this. This is a criminal case. And it is incredibly raw, and it can actually really, really, really hurt someone physically, emotionally, socially. There can be bullying. I just look through the comments on some of these shows, and I've talked a little bit about this on TikTok. Even TikTok's way worse than YouTube, but there's often a lot of passive aggressive threats just in the comment section on videos. And I always try to educate people, like, we can very respectfully disagree and not see things the same way, but why do we have to take it to it's not even passive aggressive, sometimes it's the actual threat. And I often just block those, delete those, because to be honest, I see nothing beneficial in people who behave like that.
And I've seen a lot of comments too about this, that it's just a money grab, or she's trying to force a settlement. This is not the scenario where she's going to get a settlement. This is out of her hands, really. And she even, as the victim, let's say that there was a financial settlement of some sort, and there was a separate civil proceeding or settlement, and she agreed to back off. They still could call her as a witness, and they still have the evidence that they do have. And it may be, and I think it should be important enough to the prosecutor to continue to push forward, even if she's not cooperating. They still.
Why wouldn't she want to cooperate, Ron?
If it was terms of settlement, if she did enter into a settlement. But, again, she went to the police 4 days after the incident. There has not been a civil action filed in this. And so I don't see the evidence that there's any financial incentive to her right now. Instead, once this really gets going and becomes more public, she's going to get dragged through the mud for doing this, and she's going to be, everybody's going to know she had sex with a football player.
That was one thing I was kind of getting at, that I wanted you to explore a little bit more, is that it happens more often than we think, right? Like, just like we've learned how many innocent people potentially may take a plea deal because of whatever extraneous factors that are out of their control. This is also a situation where, hey, I want to go forward. I want to press charges because this happened to me. And, I want to educate the world that this can happen to anyone and it's the right thing to do. But then you're 6 months in and you are getting threats, you are getting bullied, you are getting, really just ridiculed to the point where you are having a hard time getting through the day. And sometimes that is situations where the victim will go forward and just say, I don't want to participate in this anymore. I want my life back.
Yeah. There's always a chance with these sorts of things where the allegations are false. And I know that's always brought up, usually by fans of the alleged perpetrator and people on their side who support them. I am as strong against false allegations of abuse and rape like this as I am against rape. And I think both are just heinous. One because of what the act is, and one because of what it drags somebody who is otherwise innocent. So we don't know right now whether he did it or not. We know they had consensual sex, and that's about it. But this is very different from the Jake Retzlaff situation last year, which did turn out to be false allegations. I do believe, at least it was dismissed. I think it turns out that she probably was assaulted, but it was by somebody else. I don't know whether it was by mistake or intent that Jake was accused. But this is a very different circumstance from that. And as much as I would love to believe that one of my BYU football players, and I want it clear, I am a huge BYU basketball fan. Very, very big. I am not, I'm not one of those that's out to cast a bad light on BYU athletes. I'm not at all. However, there's a lot of indicia in this that there's something seriously there. And I'm also not going to automatically disbelieve the victim just because she's accusing one of, someone who I've watched now for 3 years on the BYU football team and loved watching him and the things that he's done. It's just, it's really sad. And I understand, and I am a huge fan. And I also, I don't want to be too cagey about it, but I do have some contacts with people very close to the program. I do know that this has hit the team very, very hard too. And there's a lot of coming to grips with the reality of being not just a college football player, but a BYU football player as well. And it does sound like this came as a surprise to the team and to the university. And that's something that I've seen thrown around a lot too, is what did BYU know, and what did the coaching staff and the football program know, and when did they know it?
Or even his family. I see this happen so often, is that people assume that a parent of an adult child had to know that this was happening.
Mm-mm.
And it really infuriates me because it's like that connection is not automatic. And so keep going, Ron, because that's super important. But yeah, I agree. It's not just it's the admin, the teachers, the faculty, the trainers, the girlfriend's family, his coaches. It's not automatic. A lot of people hide a lot of traits and behaviors that they are not comfortable with or that they are not proud of. They hide it.
Yeah, my parents would be the last. I would not go to my parents with this, especially if there was some. It sounds to me like he was hopeful that nothing would come of it, and it may be that I believe he was interviewed by police. I would guess that happened months and months and months ago. That was not
Prior to the digital footprints coming out.
Yeah, I think that was quite a while ago. So it may be that the passage of time led him to some level of comfort. If he thought that this was impending, I don't expect that he would have announced his engagement publicly just a few days before his arrest. Likewise, there's some indication that maybe there were subpoenas sent to BYU, either BYU police department or BYU administratively or not. It's very likely that something like that, and I think that would have happened here because there's indication that there were records that were sealed, probably came with some very clear confidentiality requirements that neither Parker nor anybody close to him be put on notice that this was happening because they deemed that he was a flight risk.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be as simple as well, one, he's from Utah, I believe, but not from St. George area. But he's also, as an athlete, he has an NIL deal, I'm sure, where he gets paid a certain amount of money through his participation. He likely has a significant amount of money that he could easily flee somewhere else if he chose to. Mm-hmm. Facing potentially, I think I've seen potentially 5 years to life is what he potentially could face, and so he would have the resources to flee. So I don't think that anyone associated with the BYU football program or anyone other than who had to know and associated with BYU knew about this, because there's questions. Well, why didn't they suspend him? Why didn't they, do this? I've seen people try to claim that they heard rumors about it. I don't know that I believe that, because I don't think I really, from what I see, I don't think anybody in the program had any idea that this was coming. There's no way they would have shown him on the Jumbotron getting engaged to his fiancée just days before an arrest warrant was coming.
Yeah, I think if there was any, I think that's another part of this investigation where that we're, going through his phone or his devices or his iPad computers. Was there anybody else? Was this a common behavior that he was engaging with women, in different areas? I'm sure they're going to go through all the matchmaking and dating websites. I mean, that happens in a lot of cases now, but they're going to try to see if there was a trend or a pattern, or if this behavior was an isolated incident, in addition to all the consent. I think that's straight on. That's going to be the biggest issue in the case. But I agree. I don't think, I think BYU is going to get a lot of backlash for this, unfortunately. And I don't think people should jump to the conclusion that this is a systematic failure and this has happened every year with respect to BYU. This happens at colleges all across the country and the world. I don't think that we can say that this is a crime or a pattern consistent with BYU, because there was the allegation last year that came out to be unfounded or untrue, and then we have this. Unfortunately, it happens with a lot of athletes. I mean, how many times throughout the year with NFL players do we hear of similar charges? I do think there should potentially be more training with athletes, and a lot more mental health education and awareness. I do think that this is an issue with professional athletes on some level that we see, and even going down to the college levels.
Mhm.
But it's unfortunate, but I do not like when people automatically jump to the family or the girlfriend, fiance, or the school or the coaches. A lot of followers and subscribers that we have, you know who you are, go into depth with us with the WSU case, right? So in our position in that WSU case, this is far-fetched because the foreseeability is a massive issue that WSU should have foreseen that BK was going to go do X, Y, and Z. So you have to keep that mindset, and you can't just flip-flop depending on how you feel about the case, because then you're looking at it this way going, okay, was it foreseeable that BYU knew that this was going to happen on any level? You got to be consistent with the way you analyze the facts, and you can't teeter with respect to what your emotional feelings want you to believe.
Yeah, and it's your emotional feelings on either side too. There are people who want this to be, would love to see this as a systematic thing, so that they could try to bring down BYU in some way. There's others who want this to be isolated, and just BYU having nothing to do with it. I tend to lean, and yes, I understand I have biases. But they may not be as strong as you may think.
I have zero biasness in this case.
You do, yeah. But I tend to think that this is just an individual who made a potentially a horrific mistake, engaged in something that hurt another person, and this needs to make its way through the system and find out what happened and why, and then let the justice system act as it should, and whatever result is appropriate, let that happen. I guarantee that the football team, the basketball teams, all the teams at BYU, all the athletes are going to go through a lot more training, a lot more instruction, and I hope that they shore that up. Not because I think this is a systemic thing, but it's just, a football team has 100 college age students on it, and any group of 100 college age boys, you're going to have some issues, and it doesn't matter if it's BYU or UCLA or any of the religious or non-religious schools. This is real life, and these are human things that we are dealing with, and it's not because of the religion or in spite of the religion. It's just because of the human beings involved.
And when you choose to go to BYU, whether you're getting an academic or an athletic scholarship, yes, in my mind, the way I look at this, a lot of the codes of conduct in my eyes are archaic. But however, that's not my religion, so I don't really have a certain feeling either way. But if you are committing to that school, you are clearly committing to their codes of conduct. You know what is expected of you. You know what you can or cannot do, whether it's a crime or not. There are going to be consequences if it is discovered. And I keep going back to this because in today's day, everything comes to light. It does. Everything. So if you are accepting a scholarship at a school that has a very strict code of conduct, that's something you need to think about before you accept that, because in this case, there is going to be very serious potential loss of life, liberty, finances, future earnings. I think that there could potentially be a very, very serious series of consequences in this case. And I'm assuming Parker probably wishes he could go back and do that night over regardless of where this case goes. But I also know that victim is probably wishing that night never happened as well. So Ron, we're running out of time. Let's just give everyone a reminder. Parker is innocent until proven guilty. We really, really talk about that a lot on our channel. These are our opinions. We have to believe in the justice system if we want the justice system to work the way it's intended to do. The burden is beyond a reasonable doubt, as Ron says, Sam says, I said, it is not optional. That is a mandatory presumption. Ron, remind everybody what beyond a reasonable doubt means.
It means that essentially you have to be very, very, very certain. If there's any reasonable doubt that you have, that it didn't happen, that either something else happened or that you're not sure about the credibility of the witnesses, then you can't get a guilty verdict. It doesn't even necessarily mean that it happened or didn't happen. Yeah, he is innocent until proven guilty. We do not victim shame either. So we give both due credibility, and allow the process to work through our judicial system, which it may or may not be the best there is, but it's the best we have. And it is effective, if inefficient at times, but it is very, very effective for the most part. And so I'm confident that once this makes its way through the process, that we'll have a really good idea of whether he did this or not. And until then, we're not presuming, but we also want to protect the victim.
I could not agree with you more. And there's just a couple myths that we want to just get out right now as we wrap this up. Just because she waited 4 days does not mean it wasn't real, does not mean it didn't happen. It's, again, delayed reporting is very common. Just because, or if in the event that there is no DNA, there's no case, that is an absolute myth. Again, this case relies very heavily on consent. Was that implied? Was that expressed? What is the digital communications do to prove either side of this? I think that the discovery phase is going to rely very heavily on the digital communications. If it took a year to arrest him, the case must be super weak. No, I actually think the opposite of that, because it sounds to me like they continued to do the investigation and they did not file the PCA to get the arrest until they firmly believed that they had enough. But Ron, what do you think about sealed versus covered up?
It had to be sealed for a time so that they could preserve the evidence, make sure that it's for the integrity of the investigation. So the fact that it was sealed does not mean that anybody's covering it up, whether it be the police department or BYU. I honestly, it really seems to me that nobody with BYU really knew what was happening with this or what it was. And if Parker was smart, he wouldn't have told anybody regardless. And the fact that he's been removed from the school and the team, that has no bearing on whether they think he's guilty or whether he is guilty of this. That's a completely separate administrative thing that is between him and the school. And it very well could have more to do with an honor code violation than it does with this, whether he's guilty of what he's accused of.
I agree. And it's important for everyone to remember that if he's already admitted that there was sexual intercourse, then he's in violation of the university's honor code. And even beyond that, the university is coming out and saying, hey, this is no longer the right fit for our, what we represent, what our university stands for. So from a liability perspective, we want to make sure everybody knows that we did not condone this. We did not know about this. And we sure as heck did not do anything to participate in it. So we're cutting ties. But I do not think that should simultaneously be an automatic, he did it. You really have to use your critical thinking analysis through all the different compartments of this case. And we're just getting started, but there cannot be a blanket, he did it because of X, Y, and Z. And there also can't be a, he didn't do it because of X, Y, and Z. You have to look at each piece of evidence and action and comment separately. Exactly. All right, Ron, wrap us up.
All right. Well, this is a really, really serious case. It is life-changing for a number of people, not the least of which is the victim, as well as Parker Kingston. I hope that as it resolves itself, that both are able to move on, that it does receive justice. And I think if what is being alleged occurred, there does need to be justice, and there does need to be some serious consequences for Parker. And I hope that as he goes through that he learns from it and becomes a better person. And I hope the victim is able to find closure and move on with her life. I know that assault like this can stay with someone for a long, long time and affect their life for many, many, many years. And which is why I very strongly support the supporting of victims of sexual assault, and ensure that their needs are met and that they are able to move on. And I just wish the best for everybody involved in this.
I agree. And, let's remember that the due process protects both the accuser and the accused, and we'll continue to follow this case on verified developments. There's going to be a lot of personal feelings, speculations, people that might want to jump on the bandwagon and potentially start spreading rumors. But yes, we will always talk about our speculation into certain documents or evidence or the process or the disposition, but we will break down the court filings, the hearings, and the official statements for everyone. And we'll do that responsibly. And I also want to remind everyone that Sam is actually on vacation right now. So we are allowing and encouraging her to not work off the clock either, which is why you get both of us. But she has not gone anywhere. She will be back next week to jump back on. But it was very important for me to encourage her to really be off the clock. And the three of us have, again, spent a very large portion of our career to very aggressively advocating for domestic violence clients, and we will continue to do so. And we have listed a number below. If you are the victim of domestic violence and you need someone to talk to, please make sure you reach out to the number below, and many other resources that are available. We do have some additional resource on custodyqueens.com for potential victims of domestic violence if you're trying to figure out what's going on in your home life or at your house or even just in a relationship. The law with respect to abuse has expanded significantly over the last couple of years, and it is not just limited to physical violence. So I hope this victim gets the treatment that she will likely need regardless of the outcome, because that trauma, until it's truly treated and healed, it can last for a very long time. Ron, any last thoughts about domestic violence or anything else with respect to this case?
I just think it's an unfortunate but inherent part of our society. Especially where we have the freedoms that we have. That means we have the freedom to act both appropriately and inappropriately. We hope that we all act more appropriately, but I would encourage anyone who is the victim of domestic violence, please use the resources available. Please get help, and know that there are people out there to support you.
See something, say something as well. I think that now that there's so much more education going on about all of this, and obviously the files that we were talking about briefly, it's you also have to remember that, again, you're likely being tracked or watched at some point on some platform. So be kind. We don't need to threaten anybody, even if we think that they might be not the most brilliant person. We have to do that. It's okay for us to respectfully disagree. And I agree more than anybody that sometimes there are comments that are just so like WTF that it is hard not to respond. But for the most part, we're all in this together. And so we'll make sure that we link further resources available. And also, if you are someone that's been accused of domestic violence wrongfully, there are resources available to you as well. So with that said, we will be covering this case. I think it'll be a super extensive and discovery process with respect to experts. Ron?
I think so. So stay tuned. And if you're here after following our Idaho 4, keep following us. If you're here because you happen upon the BYU connection, stay with us. I know you guys like true crime, so stay with us. We got some great stuff.
And Ron has an additional channel that we will be working with him as well, and that's going to cover a little bit more of the legal side with respect to being a certified appellate specialist and beyond. So we'll make sure we share that for you. But we have a lot of cases that we're going to be talking about coming up. Of course, we still have the Nancy Guthrie case that, if and when that actually gets to a trial, we will be working on that. We have the Karen Reed civil case that is going on. We have the Idaho federal civil case that we will be continuing to dive into. I believe there are some briefs that are due on February 27th, so we'll head into that. But thank you for joining us on this episode and every episode. And if there are questions that you want us to answer, make sure you are putting it below. And if you haven't, please hit that like and subscribe. It just gets us more into the algorithm. It allows us to dance with it more and get in front of more eyes. And if you think there's something we can do better, I am sure you will let us know, as you always do.
Bye.